Hey, it's Mr. Estrada, and our learning target is I can solve problems that involve isosceles triangles. So this is a continuation of our last video on isosceles triangles. This is part two, so why don't we just go ahead and review real quick what we know about isosceles triangles. So we know that in an isosceles triangle, or an isosceles triangle, is a triangle with two congruent sides and two congruent angles. And the example we looked at was this one. This is an isosceles triangle because we're given that side AB is congruent to side AC. And we can indicate congruency with the hash marks. All right, now, since we know these two sides are congruent, we know that we have congruent angles. And the congruent angles are opposite the congruent sides. So we know that angle B is congruent to angle C. So these two angles are congruent to each other also. So we could say angle B is congruent to angle C. So that's just a little summary of an isosceles triangle. You got two equal sides, and the two equal angles are opposite those two equal sides. And the reverse of that is also true, or the converse of that is also true. If you have two equal angles, the equal sides are opposite those equal angles. All right, let's try an example. It says in triangle MNO, MN is congruent to OM, and measure of angle O is 28 degrees. Find the measure of angle M. So we're going to begin by drawing a picture. So I'm going to draw an isosceles triangle. It's always a good idea to draw a picture if you're not given one. And I'm going to label the vertices M, N, and O. And it says the side, so this is talking about a side. The side MN is congruent to the side OM. So I can indicate that with hash marks. I know MN is congruent to OM. So these two sides are congruent, and since those two sides are congruent, I know the angles opposite are also congruent. So I know this angle is congruent to this angle. And I'm just going to erase these things so it doesn't get too cluttered. So I got my two equal sides, and I got my two equal angles opposite those sides. And what it says is that angle O is 28 degrees. So this is 28 degrees. Find the measure of angle M. So I can label this X. Well, how can I solve for X? Well, since I know that angle N is equal to angle O, I can also say that this is 28 degrees. And I can make an equation because I know that they still have to add up to 180, right? It's still a triangle. Doesn't matter if it's isosceles or not. So I could say x plus 28 equals 180. And then just go ahead and solve for x. And when you solve for x, you get x equals 124. That's your final answer. Well, that's what x equals. So we could say now angle M is equal to 124 degrees. That's your answer. So again, what you want to do, just a little tip is you want to label the given information, and and this all comes from that first video where I gave you those tips, these tips over here. So you want to draw a picture, you want to label the information with hash marks. So for us, the information was MN is congruent to OM, so I labeled that with hash marks. Then you want to label the implied information. So if given two equal sides, then the angles opposite those sides are also equal. So since I knew these two sides are equal, I knew that the angles opposite those sides must also be equal. So I knew this angle O had to be equal to angle N. And then, you could just take it from there. Let's try another example. In triangle ABC below, angle B is congruent to angle C. So I'm going to go ahead and label that. So this angle is congruent to this angle. So angle B is congruent to angle C. And it wants me to solve for x, then find the perimeter. Well, they drew a picture for me already, and they labeled the sides for me, right? It's important to note that these expressions here represent sides because they're outside of the triangle. So 2x plus 32 represents the side AB, this represents the side AC, and this represents the side BC. So they drew a picture for me, they labeled for me, and now I have to label the implied information. Since I know these two angles are congruent, I know that the sides opposite from those angles must also be congruent. So I know that side AB has to be congruent to side AC. And that can help me solve for x, right? Because I know AB is congruent to AC, so I could write 2x plus 32 is equal to 3x plus 24. And then you can just go ahead and solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 2x. So I get 32 equals x plus 24. Subtract 24 from both sides. I get 8 equals x. But I'm not finished, right? I have to find the perimeter. So if 8 equals x, that means this side AB is going to be equal to 2 times 8 plus 32. So that's going to be 16 plus 32. And 16 plus 32 is 48. So I know this side measures 48, and this one will obviously also measure 48 because it has to be equal to the other side because it's an isosceles triangle and those are the two sides that are equal. And when I substitute here, and I have to substitute because this side is not necessarily equal to the other sides. So I got 6 times 8 plus 2, that's 48 plus 2, which is 50. So if I add the sides, 50 plus 48 plus 48, that will give me the perimeter. And 50 plus 48 plus 48 is equal to 146. So 146 is equal to the perimeter. I'm trying to put a box around that. There it is. All right, let's try another example. In the diagram below, triangle LMO is isosceles with LO equal to MO. So this is talking about a side, this is talking about a side, and it's saying the side MO is congruent to the side LO. So these two sides are equal. So once I know that, I know that the angles opposite those sides are also equal. So I know that angle L has to be equal to angle LMO. So if this is 50, I know that automatically this right over here has to be 50. All right? All right, well, once I know this is 50, I know that these two angles here have to add up to 180. So 180 minus 50 is 130. So this angle here is 130 degrees. And I'm looking for angle N. So I know that angle N plus that 41 plus that 130 have to add up to 180. That's the triangle angle sum theorem, right? If I just sort of focus on the triangle here that I just highlighted, angle N, which I'm looking for, plus this, plus 130 has to add up to 180. So go ahead and solve for N. You should get N equals 9. So angle N equals 9. Alright, so obviously this is not drawn to scale, right? That doesn't really look like a 9-degree angle, but it is. We just confirmed it. Alright, so I hope this video helps. Take care. Whoops. Whoops. Let me close that. Where is my... Alright, there it is.